Hey everyone, Motorola is well known for making great budget and mid-range phones, and it seems like their latest mid-ranger, the Motorola One Fusion Plus, is no different. It has a huge battery, a good chipset, and a large screen which is unmarred by any hole punches or cutouts. That said, the mid-range is a pretty difficult segment to compete in, so how does this phone fare? I'm Andrew for GS Marina, and this is our review of the Motorola One Fusion Plus. The Fusion Plus has a glass front, and a single piece of plastic makes up the frame and back of the phone. It's colored in a twilight blue gradient, which is lovely to look at. Well, until you get fingerprints all over it, because it's quite the smudge magnet. There is splash resistance, but not IP68 protection, so you can't exactly give it a wash to get rid of said smudges. On the back, you'll also find a rear-mounted fingerprint reader, which works nicely, and the quad camera setup that protrudes just a bit. It shouldn't wobble on flat surfaces if it's in a case though. When you turn it around, you'll notice that the phone has a very clean design with no notches. Motorola is calling this their total vision display. This is thanks to a pop-up selfie camera at the top of the phone. And of course, it features fall detection. The bezels aren't that thin, especially the one at the bottom, so it feels like a bit of a miss that they didn't include a notification LED somewhere on the phone. In the hand, the Fusion Plus is a little heavy and it's a larger phone, but if you're not looking for something compact, it's not overwhelming. The 6.5-inch IPS LCD is a very good one for the price. It has a Full HD resolution, 396 ppi, and it even supports HDR10. You'll really be able to enjoy your favorite Netflix shows. It got 454 nits of max brightness in manual mode and 562 nits in auto. This is about average for an LCD, but we had no issues with sunlight legibility even on really sunny days. The minimum brightness was 6.2 nits, which is good for an LCD. The screen also had good color reproduction and an excellent contrast ratio. While the headphone jack hasn't completely disappeared from budget and mid-range phones, it's still nice to see here, and you'll find that it also supports FM radio. There's a single speaker at the bottom which wasn't overly loud, so it only earned a good loudness score on our tests. Audio output was balanced, with a good presentation of bass, mids, and highs. The phone's battery is a huge 5,000 mAh, and to no one's surprise, it had fantastic performance, with a score of 136 hours on our endurance tests. Motorola's claims of 2-day battery life seem pretty substantiated here. Charging was less impressive, and the 18-watt charger got us only from 0 to 30% in 30 minutes. The Fusion Plus has a Snapdragon 730 chipset and 6 gigs of RAM. It offers a lot of performance for the price, and it had good numbers on our tests. So, no matter the task, the phone should be snappy. Even gaming, which can be quite the torture test, is a smooth experience. As far as software is concerned, the Moto One Fusion Plus has Android 10 with Moto's very clean UI on top. It's very close to stock Android, but this particular phone isn't a part of Android One. Still, you'll find some nice custom features in the Moto app. There are Moto actions which will be familiar to you if you've ever used a Motorola device before. Karate chop to turn on the flashlight, twist the phone to launch the camera, and use the 3-finger screenshot gesture to, well, capture a screenshot. Moto Game Time also lets you filter out calls and notifications, block Moto actions from interrupting your play, and turn off adaptive brightness. If you're not into navigation buttons, the Fusion Plus has gesture navigation with a single long button at the bottom of the phone. The Motorola One Fusion has 4 cameras on the back, with a 64-megapixel main sensor, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 5-megapixel macro cam, and a 2-megapixel depth sensor. I would have liked to see a telephoto instead of a macro cam, but this setup is pretty standard for current Moto phones. The quad-Bayer main camera shoots at 16 megapixels by default. The photos are excellent for its class, with fantastic contrast and dynamic range, true-to-life colors, and no noise. Sharpening is aggressive, but it doesn't detract from the experience, and you'll find that Auto HDR is on by default. It really boosts dynamic range with a very minor loss of detail, so just leave it on like Moto intended. If you take shots at the full 64-megapixel resolution, you'll find that photos have exceptional detail and great contrast in colors. There was no Auto HDR, so dynamic range takes a hit, but the pictures were still great. They do take longer to shoot, however. The ultra-wide camera upscales photos from 8 megapixels to 16, and to be frank, they weren't very good as detail is very poor. Still, if you do choose to use it, there's a wide field of view, and contrast, dynamic range, and colors are all good. The 5-megapixel macro camera has autofocus, so pictures were all nicely focused. They didn't excel in terms of detail and contrast though. Portraits had abundant detail, great contrast, and the subject separation is good for the class. The bokeh looks good too, though it wasn't mind-blowing. At night, with Auto HDR on, photos were good with plenty of detail, nicely restored highlights, low noise, and excellent contrast and color saturation. On the rare occasion where the Auto HDR didn't switch on, images were noisier with blown highlights. Night vision made colors even brighter, more colorful, and more contrasty. While we saw more detail in highlights and shadows, there was an overall loss of detail and some over-sharpening, but as a whole we liked the shots. At night with the ultra-wide, images were unimpressive and looked soft. The Fusion Plus can capture videos up to 4K at 30 FPS with its main cam, while the ultra-wide and macro snappers can capture full HD at 30 FPS. 4K videos with the main camera have good resolve detail, though we expect more. Colors are nicely saturated and contrast is pleasant. The dynamic range could have been better, but it's not bad. Full HD videos at 30 FPS are great across the board in terms of detail, contrast, and colors. They are over-sharpened though, and the dynamic range is limited. Though stabilization is supposed to be available on any camera and in any mode, it only really worked on the main camera in Full HD. Videos shot with the ultrawide were soft, but overall pretty good. The pop-up selfie camera is a 16-megapixel quad Bayer shooter with fixed focus. Images are outputted at 4 megapixel by default, and they had great detail, colors, and contrast. The dynamic range wasn't quite as impressive, but the Auto HDR helped a lot. Selfie portraits were pretty middle of the road, and the subject separation made the occasional error. If you're looking for a phone without frills that fits nicely in a budget in the lower mid-range, the Motorola One Fusion Plus should be at the top of your list. The great battery life, solid design, unblemished screen, and good photo quality mean that it'll be a fantastic phone to have in your pocket. Sure, there's no telephoto camera, the ultrawide cam is far from the best we've ever seen, and the video capture is only decent, but at this price, this isn't much of a sacrifice. Even with all the competition, if you're looking for a phone that has all the basics covered, we definitely recommend this one. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.